Hello and welcome. Tonight, major candidates in Edo State governorship election relate their experience as they cast their ballots in the exercise. Residents of Edo State also exercise their franchise as they cast their votes to elect a governor to run the state affairs for the next 4 years. And we are joined by the INEC Director on Voter Education, Mr. Festus Okoye, for an appraisal of the conduct of the poll. And tributes pour in around the world for U.S. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg as battle lines form over her successor. Plus, you'll see business and sports.
On business news tonight, federal government to open registration portal for 75 billion naira micro, small and medium enterprise scheme on Monday next week.
And on sports news tonight, world number one Novak Djokovic survives scare against Germany's Dominik Koepfer at the Rome Masters.
The governorship candidates of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Mr. Godwin Obaseki, and Pastor Sergei Zeyamu of the All Progressives Congress, APC, and others have exercised their franchise at their various polling units as they seek to be elected for the top job in the state. While Mr. Zeyamu praised the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, for doing a yeoman's job, Governor Obaseki, who cast his ballot in Ward 4 of Oredo local government area, says the exercise leaves much to be desired.
Voters go through COVID-19 protocols on arrival at Ward 4 polling unit in Oredo local government area of Edo State. This is one of the main features of the governorship election taking place across the state in the COVID-19 era. Edo State Governor Mr. Godwin Obaseki is one of the registered voters in this ward. He is not exempted from the COVID-19 protocols before exercising his civic responsibility.
You are resting on me.
Meanwhile, in Igbo-Ododo, Ward 5 of Orionwa local government area of the state, the All Progressives Congress governorship candidate observes the COVID-19 measures before voting.
Leave there, come back small. Hey, camera lady.
It's mixed reactions from these leading contestants in the 2020 Edo governorship election after casting their ballots. Governor Obaseki believes that INEC could have done better.
You could see that the corridors were very slow, and that is the situation across most high voting population centers in Oredo from the reports I've gotten to now. And for me, that's a bit worrying.
While his APC counterpart, Mr. Zeyamu, insists the exercise is a good outing for INEC.
I'm happy I've been able to vote. And when I'm able to talk to our people, I will have a fair idea of how well it's going. But here, I have no complaint. I think the process has been okay. The INEC people came on time. They appear to be very well prepared.
The Independent Electoral Commission, INEC, is expected to play a key role in the Edo governorship poll.
Perfect one, near perfect in the end of INEC. You could see just that we have a voter party. From the percentages that I'm seeing from actual voters or number of booklets used.
The results have started trickling in from the polling units. It's now a matter of time before the final announcement of the winner of the Edo governorship election.
Now, today, Election Day in Edo State saw candidates of political parties and residents across the state come out in their respective polling units to cast their vote. While the exercise kicked off according to schedule in some places, it wasn't so in other areas as voters complained of the slow pace of voting in their units.
It's the first major election amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, and early preparations for the 2020 Edo governorship elections begin with officials of the Independent National Electoral Commission posting out materials at the various polling units. The exercise, scheduled to start at 8 a.m., is however delayed due to the necessary COVID-19 guidelines checks.
But see what we have there. People just enter into the thing, ask them how they like it. Nothing is going on.
With an average turnout across the voting centres, both young and old alike come out for the accreditation process and then cast their votes. But there's some tension at the Amokwai Model Primary School in Oredo local government area between voters and INEC officials, which threatens to spiral out of control. But the situation is soon contained following an intervention by security agencies. The voters, who are mostly seen with their face masks, say it has been a smooth and peaceful process so far.
It's okay, it's not too bad anyway. Not too bad. What do you make of the environment, the process and everything? Everything has been going smoothly. It's fine.
If you look at the streets, persons have kept generally to stay at home order, and there have been soldiers and policemen at intervals around the total state. So I think the election has been peaceful. The security is okay for now.
It's a different opinion from the election observers, who say that there is no adherence to the COVID-19 safety protocols.
COVID protocols were observed in protests. What am I saying? People were using facial masks, yes, but there was no social distancing like we are observing now. They were all clustered together. Temperatures were not taken, no hand sanitizers, and so it appears that the number of persons were just surging, on the ad hoc staff, yes. So generally that is what we are observing.
Meanwhile, the Deputy Inspector General of Police, Leye Oyibade, is in charge of security at the post, and he rates performance high.
The voters are enthusiastic to come out and vote, and that is because we have told them that all security arrangement is going to protect lives and property. They are so enthusiastic, and that is what is all about democracy. It should be inclusive, it should be free, it should be fair, and it should be acceptable at the end of the day. So what we have seen is policemen dominating but not intimidating. Security agencies all over the places, they are not intimidating, but they are giving assurance and reassurance.
Edo residents have cast their votes, and now the wait is on for the Independent National Electoral Commission to complete the process of collation and counting the ballots to find out who has the mandate to run the state's affairs for the next 4 years.
Staying with Edo State. Now, one of the challenges at the Edo State governorship election was the observance of COVID-19 protocols at the various polling units. And this is despite the efforts of the Independent National Electoral Commission to enforcing the use of face masks, the use of handheld thermometers, hand sanitizers. It appeared the safety regulations were largely not observed. This next report takes a look at the situation observed at polling units.
Governorship election. Perhaps in their enthusiasm, the people seem oblivious of the danger that still hovers. In spite of the clear and present menace of the coronavirus, the COVID-19 protocols are clearly being ignored. Despite INEC's regulations concerning the exercise, physical distancing is not observed in several places, and many are without face masks.
COVID protocols were observed in protests. What am I saying? People were using facial masks, yes, but there was no social distancing like we are observing now. They were all clustered together. Temperatures were not taken, no hand sanitizers, and so it appears that the number or persons were just surging, on the ad hoc staff. Yes. So generally, that is what we are observing.
In some cases, there is an attempt at observing the protocols with the use of temperature monitors and hand sanitizers. But that's a mere drop, considering the wide variety of ways in which one could get infected. Perhaps the governorship election in Edo State may be considered largely peaceful, but besides the concerns of the major actors about fair play, what should be most critical to all concerned is the potential spike in the number of COVID-19 cases when the election dust finally settles. Charles Eruka for Channels Television News.
Now, besides the COVID-19 protocols, the regular casting of ballots, some rather unusual scenes were also recorded at today's polls, from protests over the non-arrival of ballot boxes to scenes of monies exchanging hands in obvious vote buying to the brighter side of the polls. This report captures some of the sights and sounds of happenings at polling units.
While the elections were largely adjudged to be peaceful, tensions almost spilled over, like in this polling unit at Ward 12 in Oredo local government area. The protesters complained about the absence of ballot boxes. Elsewhere, a physically challenged voter receives assistance at a polling unit in Aviele in Isako West local government area. And it's another brighter side of the polls where there are neat queues at Iguodudu in Oreonwon local government area. We also see the seedy side of the polls where what is obviously vote buying is also captured. The police show some sophisticated presence with the use of helicopter in Oredo, but all in all, the polls came to a peaceful conclusion as results are being awaited.
Meanwhile, the Center for Democratic Development, CDD, has another take on the Edo governorship election. According to the CDD, the exercise was characterized by poor logistics management, faulty card readers, late arrival of INEC officials, and in some cases, protests by INEC ad hoc staff over non-payment of their training allowances. According to them, vote buying took a new dimension during the election as young girls were used to buy votes and the security agencies failed to arrest those involved. While briefing journalists in Abuja, the director, Idiat Hassan, expressed worry that also COVID-19 protocols were not properly observed, adding that the violence recorded was less than anticipated.
In these elections today, we observed some late arrival such that the elections did not immediately commence in several polling units. And this late arrival is, of course, occasioned by poor logistics management, especially the transportation of personnel and election materials to polling units. The issue of faulty card readers was also recorded in these elections. Across states, by Monday, we'll be giving you the specific data to tell you how rampant it is. In most places, it was immediately addressed, and in other places they had to pause for some time to address it. Very importantly is also reports of protest by ad hoc staff over non-payment of training allowances and feeding allowances ahead of the election. Across the state, we recorded lax compliance to this protocol. And we want to say that in several instances, the wearing of face masks, of course, was actually recorded, but rules of physical distancing was completely jettisoned in these elections. In our pre-election assessment released on Thursday, we were very explicit to say that vote buying may well determine the outcome of these elections. And I think what we have experienced today speaks and attests to that.
Now, the Lagos State Governor, Mr. Babajide Sanwo-Olu, has announced the further easing of restrictions on religious activities. According to him, religious centres are now allowed to observe their midweek service, while the mosques are also allowed to carry out their 5 times prayer routine a day with strict compliance to the COVID-19 safety protocols. Gyms, cinemas are now allowed to reopen with a capacity of 33%, but the decision will be taken on bars, nightclubs and event centres by next month. The governor had earlier announced the resumption of schools from Monday, September 21st during the COVID-19 update at the State House Marina. He says public schools are to open only for GS3 and SS2 students. Other arms of the public schools will open in phases when the government feels it is convenient. Now, the Kaduna State government has deployed troops to roads leading to the Kaduna International Airport as well as Juji community as part of efforts to curtail the activities of bandits and kidnappers in the area. The deployment of troops follows rising reported incidents of insecurity, which have forced many residents to relocate from their communities. The Kaduna State Commissioner for Internal Security and Home Affairs, Mr. Samuel Arua, assures that the troops will bring the activities of criminals in the area to an end. Now, earlier today, I spoke to the Independent National Electoral Commission National Chairman for Information and Voter Education, Mr. Festus Okoye, on the overall conduct of the Edo State governorship polls. The Edo State governorship election has taken place and the results trickling in. For more on the conduct of the polls, the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC National Chairman for Information and Voter Education, Mr. Festus Okoye, joins us via Skype from Abuja. Welcome to the News at 10.
Thank you so much.
Well, what reports did you get from the field on the conduct of today's election?
Well, the report we got from the field is that there has been substantial compliance with our processes and our procedures. And we are happy that we have made incremental gains in relation to our processes and our procedures. As I pointed out, in over 93, we recorded at least 93.72% push opening on time. And we are happy with that particular issue. In few of the places we didn't have a good opening, but we know what caused some of the delays, and we are taking measures to address them before we get to the Ondo governorship elections that will take place in a few weeks' time.
Are being circulated on social media as some of the results from polling units. What do you make of them? Our procedure is that there are two things that happens at the polling unit. The first is that at the end of sorting and the presiding officer will enter all the results of the political parties into Form EC8A, which is the polling unit result. And then the presiding officer is also obligated to fill Form EC60E and paste at the polling unit. That is the one we call the people's result sheet. So any individual can make use of that particular polling unit result. The only thing the person cannot do is to announce, to make a declaration and make a return. But in order to guarantee some level of transparency in the electoral process, we also created what we call INEC Result Viewing Portal, from where we uploaded the results from the polling unit for everybody to see for some level of transparency. And as at 9 o'clock, over 1,300 of those polling unit results had been uploaded in that portal. So we are trying to make everything transparent so that Nigerians will see what goes on at the polling unit, and then we bridge the gap between what happens at the polling unit and some of the challenges we have at the collation center. In just a few cases, we understand that vote buying was also taking place while voting was on. What measures have you made, perhaps to catch the perpetrators of political parties or persons involved?
One of the things we did was to recalibrate our polling units, at least to guarantee some level of secrecy and prevent people from showing how they voted or how they intend to vote. And I think we've been successfully in relation to that. But in every transaction of this particular nature, there must be a willing buyer and a willing seller. So there were some people who were willing to sell their votes, and there were also persons who were willing to buy. But what we have done was to make sure that we collaborate with EFCC and the ICPC to prevent people from doing such a thing at the precincts of the polling unit. So in a few of the places, the arrests were made, and then the EFCC and the ICPC have some of the officers patrolling some of the polling units to make sure that the sanctity of the polling units are not violated by people who are trying to buy and sell their votes. But it's a learning curve, and I believe that as we go ahead with our electoral process, some of these things will become a thing of the past, and we will be in a position to either arrest or neutralize them to a large extent.
All right, we'd like to thank you so much, Mr. Festus Okoye, the National Chairman for Information and Voter Education with INEC. Thank you for joining us on the News at 10.
Thank you so much.
The maritime transporters and commuters in Bayelsa State are calling on the Bayelsa State government to come to their aid to deal with robbery attacks on the waterways in the state. The chairman of the Bayelsa Maritime Association has appealed for soft loans for members to enable them replace engines and boats that have been stolen over time.
Bayelsa State in South Nigeria is largely riverine. Many communities are almost completely surrounded by water, making them accessible mostly through the waterways. In recent times, commuters have complained of crime on the waterways, which they say are mostly without security personnel, leaving them at the mercy of pirates.
Some boys come out with speedboat, with guns, shoot, collect money from my passengers, and my money them where the passengers don't pay to me, collect everything.
My boat was going to market.
Like Bernard Francis, most of the boat drivers whose boats and engines have been stolen by pirates are in debt. Hence, the chairman of the Maritime Association is asking for more security on the waterways as well as provision of soft loans.
Go to borrow some amount of money, worth 8 million naira, that I use in fixing myself up as a struggling man. Just July, they carry one engine. Yesterday again, they've carried on that one.
Series of complaints, we complained to the security agency to put in gunboats on the waterways and to form a vigilante to make sure that this sea piracy issue that occurring every day minimized. We are still appealing to the state government a soft loan that can be able to afford other boats to manage their life and their family will be better.
That's my maiden address.
The Commissioner of Police in the state promises that he's committed to reducing criminal activities.
We make sure that where crime does occur, that will be prompt, that will respond promptly, that will go all out for the criminals, that will pursue them and hunt them, and to get them apprehended and make sure they are prosecuted in courts.
80% of Bayelsa State is covered by water. This has also become the source of livelihood for indigents who engage in transportation as well as fishing and other related businesses. Therefore, securing the waterways becomes priority for their livelihood and safety.
You're watching Channels Television, your home for the news. Let's quickly go on a break. When the News at 10 returns, federal government to open registration portal for 75 billion naira micro, small and medium enterprise scheme on Monday next week. That's on Business News. To join us again. Welcome back. The Senate Committee on ICT and Cybercrime is worried about the digital shortfalls in the nation's education system and other sectors of the economy and wants Nigerians to take advantage of the gains of ICT to secure the future of the country and its citizens. The committee is in Bauchi State for an oversight visit and stopped over at the Al Muhiba ICT Training School, which offers international certification, a pet project of the wife of the Bauchi State Governor, Hajia Aisha Mohammed. While on a courtesy visit to the governor of the state, chairman of the committee, Yakubu Hussaini, hailed the initiative and calling on state government and private sectors to develop human capacity in ICT.
In response to the quagmire, the Senate Committee on ICT and Cybercrime is currently engaging in measures to galvanize a comprehensive, collective and broad-based response of stakeholders in Nigeria to promote digital preparedness with a view to safeguarding the present and future of our country in a world engaged in digital awakening and emerged in rampaging dimension of cyber threats. In view of the above, the committee appreciates all efforts and strides geared towards advancement of knowledge and development of skills in digital technology.
We as a government are doing so much to make sure we bring ICT to the forefront. I have one of the best commissioners of education, one of the best commissioners for ICT and information, and we have already identified UBEC-built schools for women, just for women, but that has been abandoned by the previous administration. And we want to establish ICT training center in those federal government schools.
And to a tragic story coming in from Ebonyi State, where at least 15 people have been confirmed dead and 4 persons critically injured after a coaster bus plunged into a river along Akezi-Shago Highway in Ivo local government area of Ebonyi State. The driver of the commercial bus, which is reported to have 38 passengers on board, lost control while attempting to overtake a truck and ran into the Akezi River, which was already overflowing its banks following a recent downpour. According to the Ebonyi State Police Public Relations Officer, Loveth Oda, who confirmed the incident, she says it took the effort of police in the area to rescue the 5 victims. The Public Relations Officer also said rescue operations are still ongoing and that there might be more victims in the river. In the meantime, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has offered his condolences to the government and the people of Ebonyi State over the automobile accident on the Akezu River in which several passengers are feared dead. The President, in a statement by his Senior Special Assistant on Media and Publicity, Mr. Garba Shehu, says, "We are saddened and aggrieved at the colossal loss of human lives," adding that the thoughts and prayers of the government and the people of Nigeria are with the families of the victims of the accident. He commended the Ebonyi State government in spearheading the rescue and recovery efforts, as well as the support it has received from neighboring state governments in that regard. Now, data from the National Bureau of Statistics reveals that over 21.7 million people in Nigeria are unemployed. The report, which places the country's unemployment rate at 21.7%, reveals that a combination of the unemployed and underemployed data stands at 55.7%, representing 55.7 million people. This next report analyzes the data vis-à-vis government's efforts to revive the economy.
Some economists say Nigeria is a middle-income mixed economy with expanding manufacturing, financial, communication and entertainment sectors. In 2013, Nigeria's economy was rated as the largest in the continent, a position she still maintains. However, the country's economic rating appears not to have reflected so much on citizens' standard of living, and the situation is now being compounded by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Recently, the National Bureau of Statistics released the second quarter 2020 performance of the economy. It showed that the gross domestic product GDP slumped to minus 6.10% due to the impact of COVID-19 on oil market and other variables. We wish to remind you that government has approved an economic sustainability plan containing stimulus packages for businesses to access.
Nigeria's population is estimated at 200 million, and 54% of this population are between the ages of 15 and 54, otherwise described as economically active group. Unfortunately, majority of this group are unemployed. Data from the National Bureau of Statistics reveals that over 21.7 million people in Nigeria are unemployed. The report also reveals that a combination of the unemployed and underemployed in the country stands at 55.7%, representing 55.7 million people. So what should be done to address the challenge of unemployment in the country?
What we need to do is actually to allow our industries to actually go into production by making sure that we add values to both our agri resources and the natural resources that we have, including making sure that small and medium-scale enterprises are supported in such a way that they can go into production. And also what we are able to produce, we should not actually allow them to be imported.
We are battling with unemployment. We cannot do anything about it unless we continue to deepen our industrializations and get more of our youth to be employed in factories.
Some of the recent interventions of government to address unemployment and spur economic growth include the Special Public Works Program that aims to create 774,000 jobs, the COVID-19 economic stimulus packages managed by the Central Bank, and the recently launched Medium-Term National Development Plans, which will replace the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan at the end of this year. While many laud these programs, majority of Nigerians will truly want to see how these interventions will take more people off the streets.
Well, let's take you back to the Edo State governorship election coverage. Our political correspondent, Sheon Kimbaloye, joins us live from Benin City. Hello, Sheon. The election is over. What is the latest with the election results?
Thank you, Millicent, and welcome to INEC headquarters here in Benin City, where we are waiting the results coming from the 18 local government areas of Edo State. Just behind me, of course, you can see the seats where the officials are going to be taking any moment when they are ready for the result. It does not look really that it will start any moment from now. We might be waiting for a moment longer than expected, because from what we can see and feel and the feelers that we're getting, it doesn't look so much that much of the result have coming so far. We might be keeping some vigil to expect the collation to take to start in earnest, but so far it does look like this room is ready. But are those results ready to be collated? That is the big question. They are being expected to come in. The collation officer, they have their seats in the room from across the local government areas. But so far, it's going to be like a waiting game. Of course, you can see just right behind me, one of the national commissioners, Mrs. Agbamushe Umbu, of course, who is is the national commissioner in charge of Edo State, and she's on the ground. The commissioner of police is expected to be here. The resident electoral commissioner, and of course the returning officer and media media personnel are also in this room waiting for the moment when the results will coming. Millicent.
So unfortunately, Sheon, you might be spending the night there. It's a national assignment, so get comfortable. But earlier today, the whole process, we've been reporting it, covering it. The poor observance of the COVID-19 protocols, allegations of vote buying. Your experience with regards to the earlier moments of the election?
All right, Millicent, it's a lot of issue, mixed bag of various issues that have come onto the table in an election like this. This is an off-season election. Then it means attention will be here to all the details that come into this election, the issues of vote buying, pockets of violence that has been experienced, reports of issues of disagreement with voters and all of that. But largely, experts would say that this election has been somewhat come with not as much of the violence that are being preempted or expected to happen in this election. It's largely peaceful for a lot of people who have observed this election. A lot of lapses here and there that could have been adjusted, and I guess a big lesson for everyone involved in this election, security operatives, INEC officials, and a big lesson ahead of the coming election in October, and that is the Ondo State governorship election. It's a big one. It's the first major governorship election or major election for INEC in this global pandemic COVID-19 period. Millicent.
All right, our political correspondent, Sean Kibaloye. Keep safe. We'll speak to you soon. Thank you for talking to us. Now let's bring you some business news. Here's Teniola Shubowale.
Thanks, Millicent. Welcome to Business News. The federal government is expected to open the registration portal for the 75 billion naira micro, small and medium enterprises survival fund and guaranteed offtake scheme on Monday next week. In a statement released today, the Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment, Miriam Katagum, says the scheme will be opened for 1.7 million individuals and entities across the country and would run for an initial 3 months period. She explained the initiative, which seeks to save existing jobs and creating new ones for the economy, targets 45% female-owned businesses and 5% of individuals with special needs. The minister further mentions that the MSME Survival Fund and guaranteed offtake schemes are part of the 2.3 trillion naira stimulus package in the federal government's economic sustainability plan. Nigeria's forex reserves grew by $39.52 million this week to $35.81 billion as oil prices continue to hover around $41 to $43 per barrel on the international market. At the beginning of the year, the forex reserve stood at $38.5 billion, but fell to $33.4 billion since the COVID-19 lockdown began in March, before rising to above $36 billion after the International Monetary Fund disbursed $3.4 billion loans to Nigeria in May. However, the external buffers have remained stuck at above $35 billion since late July this year. Between 2017 and 2019, Nigeria's central bank attracted significant inflows of forex while offering high interest rates as incentives to foreign investors to keep their money in the country. Well, the naira appreciated by 67 kobo against the dollar today to an average rate of 464 naira 33 kobo against 465, which it traded on Friday on the parallel forex market. Traders attribute the naira appreciation to a slowdown in demand for the dollar by the end users. Meanwhile, the naira is expected to sustain the renewed uptrend next week ahead of the central bank sale of foreign exchange to licensed bureau de change operators. The gains recorded within the start of September are gradually eroding as the third trading week at the NSE ends in negative territory. After the struggle between the bulls and the bears within 5 trading sessions, the market's main index and total value dropped by 0.08% and 0.10% each, with the month-to-date performance down at 1.0%. The losses, which comes in the absence of any positive catalyst, was largely driven by losses from the banking sector as well as some key oil and gas sector components. 41 gainers were led by 12.12% increase on WAPIC Insurance. ABC Transport leads 18 other losers, down by 16.67%, while 100 equities were unchanged in price value. Meanwhile, FBN Holdings, Axis and GT Bank contributed 31% and 31.66% to the total turnover volume and value of equities traded for the week. Meanwhile, at the market was bullish at the overall secondary treasury bills segment as the ample liquidity in the system drove demand for instruments. Despite the reduced trade and volumes, the bullish performance of almost segment was sustained from last week as local participants took positions in short to mid-tenor instruments. Similarly, trading was bullish at the Nigerian treasury bills market as market participants covered for lost bids at the auction. Despite an uptick in Nigeria's headline inflation in August, trading activities at the secondary bonds market remained bullish this week as average yield across instruments contracted by 51 basis points to 7.6%. The performance was driven by investors reinvesting maturities and coupon payments in the space. Yield contracted at the short, medium and long segments of the curve, with March 2024 bond down by 187 basis points, February 2028 at negative 47 basis points, and July 2034 down by 41 basis points. Meanwhile, analysts expect investors' attention to be shifted to the primary market auction on Wednesday, as the Debt Management Office is set to offer instruments worth 145 billion naira through reopening of the 12.50% January 2026, March 2035, July 2045, and March 2050 bonds. And that's business news tonight. It's back to Millicent for the rest of the news at 10.
Now, tributes have been pouring in from around the world for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the 87-year-old U.S. Supreme Court Justice who died on Friday after a long battle with cancer. A prominent feminist, Ginsburg was the oldest justice and the second woman ever appointed to the bench. Many describe her as a hero and a trailblazer for women. Her death, less than 7 weeks before the U.S. presidential election, has set the stage for a political fight over the future of the court.
Soon after the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was announced, large crowds gathered outside the Supreme Court building to pay homage to the judge, affectionately known as the notorious RBG.
Well, she stood up for women. She was not easily swayed, and she just had people's best interests at heart. Viewed the world differently to a lot of men. I have great respect for her.
But as America mourned her death, a fierce new political debate began unfolding. Ginsburg's death gives President Donald Trump, who is seeking re-election on November the 3rd, a chance to expand the High Court's conservative majority to 6-3. President Trump says he wants a new Supreme Court judge to be sworn in without delay, while his Democratic rival, Joe Biden, insists the decision on her replacement must wait until after the vote.
Some very sad news.
In 2016, Senate Republicans blocked Democratic President Barack Obama's pick for the U.S. top court. At the time, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell justified the move on the grounds that it was an election year. The highest court in the U.S. is often the final word on highly contentious laws, disputes between states and the federal government, and final appeals to stay executions. Justices can serve for life unless they decide to retire. Ginsburg had experienced a series of health issues, including bouts with pancreatic cancer in 2009 and 2019, lung cancer in 2018, and colon cancer in 1999. She disclosed on July the 17th this year that she had a reoccurrence of cancer. She was appointed to the Supreme Court by former President Bill Clinton in 1993, becoming only the second of 4 female justices to be confirmed to the court, where she served for 27 years. She died at her home in Washington, D.C. on Friday, surrounded by her family.
Well, just before we go back to the coverage of the Edo State governorship election, the national chairman of the PDP Campaign Council and governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, have commended security agencies and INEC for conducting what they describe as a peaceful governorship election in Edo State. Governor Wike, who was in company of his Delta and Oyo State's counterparts, Dr. Ifeanyi Okowa and Mr. Seyi Makinde, also noted that the work is not done until the final election results are announced. And the main news again, residents of Edo State today exercised their franchise as they cast their votes to elect a governor to run the state's affairs for the next 4 years. The exercise was generally adjudged peaceful. Also today, major candidates in the Edo State governorship election related their experiences as they cast their ballots in the exercise. And you saw tributes poured in around the world today for U.S. Supreme Court Justice RBG, even as battle lines began to form over who will succeed her. Stay with Channels Television, your home for the news. We continue to bring you live updates from the Edo State governorship election. I'm Millicent Walker. Thank you for watching the news at 10.